Thanks very much, Chad. Our next speaker is from Cellepathy. It's Sean Ear. Sean is the co-founder and vice president of marketing for this company. Cellepathy is a smart up group company and develops context-based solutions that improves the way people integrate mobile devices into their lives. Sean.
Thank you. This is the clicker. Ah, there we go. Okay, great. So Cellepathy develops algorithms using mobile device sensors to better understand the environment in which a device is being used and how it's being used. When we talk about smartphones, everyone knows their smartphone already has a GPS sensor on it, but if you don't work with technology all the time, you might not be fully aware of all the sensors on these devices. When you take your phone and you rotate it horizontally and the screen changes automatically, the reason that happens is because there's an accelerometer on your phone which feels the pull of gravity and feels vibrations and movements and shaking. If you've ever used your phone to play a racing game and you've steered the car or the plane like this, right, that's because there's a gyroscope inside which detects very subtle changes in tilt and angle. And in addition to those sensors, there are also there's at least one camera, a microphone, a speaker, multiple radios, a compass, a proximity sensor. It's a very sensor-rich environment. We've been around since 2010, but you haven't heard of Cellepathy because for the most part we focused on developing our technology, not on marketing ourselves. And in fact, even though NHTSA has been aware of our work for about 2 years, this is the first time we've ever appeared in any public forum. We've developed a very broad portfolio of distraction driving prevention technologies. We're not going to have the time to talk about all of them today. We'll give one example so you have a feel about what we work with. But I do want to make the point that even though some of our technologies are at different stages in the product lifestyle, this isn't a theoretical conversation. Our first product is out in the world, it's live, it's protecting employees and preventing crashes. So this panel is really about something called the passenger problem. We were inspired to start this company in 2010 after an article by the technology columnist of the New York Times, who now works for Yahoo. He did a review of the first generation of this emerging class of distracted driving prevention technologies. And he found that they all suffered from the passenger problem. And it's essentially an inability to distinguish drivers from passengers in a moving vehicle. And if you can't do that, you're left with two choices. One, treat everybody in the moving vehicle as if they were a driver. Or two, create an opt-out method that passengers can use to dismiss driver mode, which of course drivers can also use. And between those two sort of bad choices, the default has been to essentially make driver mode voluntary, which is sort of the mentality that's affected this entire ecosystem for the past 3 years. But if you can solve the passenger problem, if you can distinguish accurately and reliably between drivers and passengers, well, you can make driver mode mandatory. You can make it non-voluntary. You can not leave it up to the consumer. So in this industry, a solution to the passenger problem really is the holy grail. There are, in the world of distracted driving, there are very broadly two different classes of solutions. The first, vehicle-based solutions, in which a piece of hardware external to the phone sends it a signal letting it know that it's driving. And device-based solutions, which are where the technology is wholly contained within the device, relying on the sensors that come with it. There are advantages and disadvantages and characteristics to both. Cellepathy actually works on both types of solutions. Vehicle-based solutions, because they require special hardware in the vehicle, they don't protect all vehicles at any point in time, right? Maybe your work vehicle is protected, but when you get home and you're driving your own vehicle, you're able to use your device freely. Maybe your vehicle is protected, but your husband's device isn't. Or maybe all your vehicles at home are protected, but when you go on a sales trip and you get in a rental car, you're not protected anymore. Hardware, of course, adds cost. Whether it's OEM or aftermarket, you're talking about a piece of equipment. And as we know from research by the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety, once a vehicle-based safety feature emerges into the market, it takes up to 30 years for that safety feature to percolate, to disseminate to 95% of the vehicles on the road. In comparison, a device-based solution works in every vehicle. Your own vehicle, your friend's vehicle, a rental car. Because it uses the computing power and the software and the sensors that are already on these devices, there's no marginal cost to a device-based solution. And because devices are turned over so much more quickly, every year, 2 years, or 3 years, you can roll out a solution. If we're talking about a nationwide systematic approach, you can roll out a solution very quickly. So we're going to talk about Cellepathy's device-based solution today, not our hardware-based solution. And device-based solutions have a particular form. The first thing that they need to do is persistently detect when a trip begins or ends. My phone right now is using its accelerometer. It knows it's face up on a table and that I'm not driving. When I do get in a cab later on today, it's going to know that I entered a vehicle and started a trip, and it'll put me into driver mode. And that'll be a non-voluntary, mandatory driver mode that happens without me taking any steps. If I have a connected system in my car, I'll be able to connect, of course, and take advantage of that. But if not, I'm in driver mode, unless I'm a passenger. And because I'm going to be in a taxi, I'm going to be a passenger. And I will be able to authenticate, to prove to the device that I am, in fact, a passenger. And Cellepathy has a lot to say about trip detection, a lot to say about driver mode, but today we're going to focus on passenger authentication. In order to do that, in order to distinguish reliably drivers from passengers, we've invented a concept of a PAT, a passenger authentication task. And the idea here is that you create a series of steps that's fast and easy for passengers to perform, not possible for the driver of a moving vehicle to perform, and wholly contained within the device. Now we have a whole portfolio of different PATs. I'm going to describe one of them to you, but before I do, I just want to put it in context. Many of you will remember that in 2009, Webster's Dictionary decided that the word of the year was distracted driving. That was due in large part to the efforts of former Secretary of Transportation Ray LaHood and also some of the other people in this room. I don't know how many people know what the 2013 word of the year was. Selfie. All right. Here's one that I took this morning as I was leaving the Holiday Inn. You're probably thinking to yourselves now, how is a selfie going to save lives? Well, legitimate question. Let's get back to the PAT. This is our head-eye position PAT. We have a passenger in a moving vehicle that wants to convince the device that it belongs, that is in fact a passenger, not a driver. But it's a little bit more sophisticated than just taking a selfie. The first thing the passenger needs to do is hold the device flat, parallel to the ground, and we'll know that it's in that position because of the accelerometer on the device. The next step, position your head over the camera and look at the phone. You'll see your face on the screen, and you'll see a yellow circle. Position your head until you're centered in the circle, and wait some short period of time. That period of time is configurable and depends on the speed at which you're traveling. And after you've done that, you've been released from driver mode. If you lift the device before you're done with the task, you fail and you stay a driver. If you move your face up, you fail and you stay a driver. Once you've proven to the device that you're a passenger, it's only once per trip. You're a passenger for the rest of that trip. I know that I've run out of time, so I'll be very brief in summarizing. All right, I'll take my time in summarizing. Again, you have to complete a PAT while the vehicle is moving. A driver can't do this before he starts a trip. A driver can't do this while she's stopped at a red light. So while the vehicle is moving above a certain speed, you hold the device flat. You look into the camera for a configurable period of time, and then you're released, and you only have to authenticate once per trip. Passenger collusion is a very interesting subject. You're all thinking, okay, Sean, that's really great. You've created a task. Passengers can do it easily. Drivers can't do it. You've bifurcated the population into two. But what's to stop me as a driver taking my phone and giving it to the passenger next to me and asking the passenger to authenticate using the head-eye position PAT or any of the other PATs that we have? And that's a great question, and I want to address it. We've given it a lot of thought, so bear with me as we move through this analysis. For every 10 vehicles on the road, 6 of them, 60% of the time, there is no passenger to collude. Nobody's going to do the PAT. You've got the problem solved. You're safe. 40% of the vehicles on the road, there is another occupant, a passenger. Now, sometimes it's just an infant, but there's someone there, and maybe they will collude for you. Not everyone is going to collude. But we'd be naive to think that no one is going to collude. So we needed to find some sort of rate for estimating what will be the degree of passenger collusion. And for that, we avail ourselves of the NHTSA fun facts. NHTSA conducts surveys about attitudes toward distracted driving in this country. And they've found, you can't see it, it's cut off, that 90% of passengers feel very unsafe, not just unsafe. 90% feel very unsafe if the driver of their vehicle is typing or texting. 76% of drivers, not the full that feel totally very unsafe, but 76% of passengers, would actually speak up and ask the driver to stop. So when we're trying to figure out what percentage will actually collude, I think we're being very conservative when we say 10%, and I'll tell you why I think we're being really conservative. There are legal considerations here. If you've unlocked a driver's device and then they go ahead and crash, well, the plaintiff's attorney, the other side, the plaintiff's attorney is going to find out in discovery how the driver was using that phone, and there'll be photographic evidence because you filmed yourself that you unlocked the phone for the driver. And if it comes down to manslaughter or something, there'll be a police inquiry and they'll also find the evidence as well. So for these reasons, I think that the 10% number is high, but let's go with it. Maybe we have 4% collusion of passengers, but that means that we've solved 96% of the problem, and we've done it with something that's wholly contained inside of the device. We have a safety feature that, just like child-proof twist-off tops on prescription medicine bottles, just like airbags are mandated into vehicles, driver mode, a non-voluntary mandatory driver mode, can be regulated, built into a mobile device without the need for any sort of complicated cross-industry ecosystem protocols. It just works. When we're trying to think about all the education, all the legislation, we can make the connected car experience as good and as friendly as we want, but the best way to ensure that drivers demand an in-car connectivity system is to make sure that driver mode is mandatory and non-voluntary on the device. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean, and I'm glad they've finally let you out of the back room to talk in public, or maybe you've let yourself out since you're the co-founder of the company. But